What's up, No Nation? It's the guys from Planting the Spear back with you for another episode. Today, Michael, I'm excited to talk about some defense. Florida State has been dominant on that side of the football in the past couple of years, and we're looking for another big year this year. So we just dropped our offensive preview for you guys. Make sure you go check that out. Up next is the big one, the win-loss prediction for the season. But right now, we're going to talk about some defense. We got a couple other things to get into there, Mr. Flip-Flop McElroy. We're going to talk about you a little bit too. And ESPN, oh man, we got they're after us, Michael. I mean,
I believe it.
There's no
I've been saying it
now. So we're going to get into that too. But man, a fully packed episode that we're excited to talk about some football today as we get really close to kickoff. But before we jump in, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. I mean, like you said, ESPN, I don't know what is going on, man. I've been putting on the tinfoil hat for a long time, and it's finally showing their true colors. And old Greg McElroy, who basically won a title by the defense, didn't even do anything over here. Being Florida State's fan and now being against Florida State, sounds like the puppet masters are spinning their little fingers now, trying to get the word out early in the season. So yeah, let's get into it. We got some stuff we got to deal with.
Yeah, and for those of you watching on YouTube, we got the throwbacks today. You got the old school jersey on, and of course, I had to bring out the Marvin Jones, the hit shirt for the defensive preview, because that's the only way to do it. Before we talk about a little defense, I apologize if my voice is a little bit off today. It was my birthday yesterday, and we went to a little surprise concert that my wife took me to last night, and it was like, it was them high school days cover band. So, I was belting them out. Thank goodness it was loud. Nobody could hear me, or the cats would have came coming or something like that. But it was a good time. So getting into this, man, yes, ESPN has gone full like anti-FSU campaign. It's kind of crazy. And, everybody's going to come out and say that you're a conspiracy theorist. You're putting on the tinfoil hat. I mean, we talked about the CFP back in the day. We said that we weren't trying to be conspiracy theorists, but it kind of feels very much tinfoil hattish right there.
Yeah.
And then, again, budget cuts, air quotes, budget cuts is why these moves happen. But it is kind of coincidental here that RG3 comes out and defends Florida State.
That's right.
The day after Paul Feinbaum, who we got into roasting in the last episode, he trashed Florida State, basically, made fun of them on national TV. RG3 comes out with a pretty passionate defense. I shared it on our social media. It was a great statement. Dude gets fired the next day. And then if that wasn't enough to make you put on the tinfoil hat, Sam Ponder gets fired as well. So, really just anybody with any FSU connections really kind of seem to get fired. So, Michael, I mean, I've been putting it off. I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy. I don't know what they got going on out there at Area 51 or whatnot, but with this ESPN mess, I'm going for it. I'm putting
there
on,
you go.
let me crinkle this for the podcast listeners so you can hear. I'm going full tin hat today, buddy, because I think ESPN is after Florida State. I think they are out to get us. I think they are in full on take FSU down mode. So it's pretty crazy. Maybe they know something. Maybe they know that we'll be joining RG3 at Fox pretty soon when we go to the Big Ten. We'll have to see. But yeah, man. And then McElroy, old flip-flop McElroy, coming out here, and he was so actually. The sad thing was, man, he was a supporter of FSU there for a while. His people actually used to send me clips to share where he would be praising Florida State. And then like a light switch, again, like you said, the puppet master pulled the string, and, they wanted to give Nick Saban his retirement run in the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, our boy flipped on us and just started bad-mouthing Florida State. And then he comes out yesterday or day before yesterday and says that he thinks Florida State and Michigan, and I ain't going to argue with the Michigan part, but he thinks Florida State is going to finish the season unranked. And so, but this was also the same guy to look at his opinion on the games. And I'm not saying he doesn't know football. I mean, hey, he's done a lot more in college football than I have.
Right.
But, I mean, you look at that title game that you talked about, 6 of 11 for 58 yards and no touchdowns. I mean, minus 27 rushing yards. Your boy can lose 27 yards on the ground. I could handle that. So, I might have been 1 of 11 on the swing pass, but
it's like that guy. It's like that person who shows up to a group project and does nothing but get the A. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's McElroy.
Exactly. Like you were just present on the team.
Exactly.
So it is ridiculous, man. It's like, again, I don't want to go full conspiracy theorist, but I already got the tinfoil hat on, so we're already there. Man, it just all the things that you see point to this being some kind of weird, like behind the scenes, dark web type of stuff,
Yeah.
juju to get Florida State. And I don't understand it where it's like everybody who kind of has that opinion of FSU either has changed their opinion or been booted. I mean, I know we're in the lawsuit thing. I know that's not good for everybody, but I mean, we're still playing under the ESPN flag. We're still bringing in money. They're still paying us money. So it just seems weird. And, again, there are some still good guys out there, Booger McFarland, you better be looking for a part-time job, brother, because they're coming for you next. Don't defend
That's
FSU.
right.
So, man, it was really interesting to see some of the stuff that's happened lately. And it's just, I don't know, man, it's hard not to wear the tinfoil hat when you see that type of stuff.
No, for sure. And here's the thing. It's ridiculous for, for ESPN to fire RG3 because he came out in defense of Florida State. I mean, Paul Fibon makes that comment about Florida State still crying tears. He didn't get fired. But
Exactly.
RG3 comes out and says, this is ridiculous. If you're making fun of people like that, something's wrong with you. And then boom, next day he's fired. Now, here's the thing, though. We all know one of the funny things I thought was that on X or Twitter, RGD posted a meme from Friday, where
Oh
his
my
dad's
God,
sitting
that
on the
was so
toilet.
funny.
He's like, how you get fired on your day off?
That was so funny.
Which is totally RG3.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that he stands for class. He stands up for people. He speaks it like it is. Like, he's not going to bow down to the corporate monster that says, hey, these are the talking points and you do as we say. Listen, he was speculated. I don't know if this is real or not, but it's speculated that he was making like somewhere near 17 million a year from ESPN. So he walked out of that. But the thing is, he's going to land on his feet because Fox was pursuing him like intensely. So he'll find a job at Fox probably. He'll make just as much money, if not better. And ESPN has been on a roll these last several years. They're losing a lot of great like personalities on screen. And then you talk about Samantha Ponder, who, formerly Samantha Steele, FSU, married to FSU quarterback Christian Ponder, former SU quarterback Christian Ponder. Now, I don't think hers is naturally attached to kind of the Florida State thing. I think there's been speculation that because of her comments around women in Title X and kind of how sports is going that way, I think ESPN was pretty upset that she didn't stick to she brought politics into the to the thing. They've had a hard stance on no politics, and then yet they did this whole segment on Leah Thompson. If you know the story, Leah Thompson, we won't get into it here, and so then Sam Ponder, spoke up for Riley, who's been one of the University of Kentucky swim team women who've been trying to stand up for Title X for women, and Sam Ponder spoke up on that, and that's probably why ESPN fired her. But still, she's an FSU, she's in the FSU family. It just looks suspicious.
It just looks suspicious here.
Now, I'll tell you this, and I'll throw this back to you on this one. I'd love your thoughts on this, Jesse, is honestly what it looks like, again, what it looks like, and I've mentioned this before, is that if Florida State does not end up in the SEC, which, I mean, every sign is now starting to say it's probably not going to happen, ESPN is trying to devalue that brand. Either, one, to make them look bad to the Big Ten SEC or Big Ten Fox, or to make their value go down so that when they do eventually get out of the ACC, they'll come at a cheaper cost to ESPN, which it's not going to happen because us Florida State fans are not going to let that happen.
Right. And see, I actually don't buy that narrative, because the reason I say that is because if they were to go to the SEC, the contract clause that they have, someone got me for this last time when I said pro rata. It was pro rata. I said, what I say? You say protato, I say protato, or whatever.
Exactly.
Who cares? Whatever it is, that part of the contract would allow Florida State to come in as a full share member anyway. So they can't negotiate the price down. The Big Ten isn't going to give you full share anyway right now. They're going to do escalators, and they're going to pay you, whatever they feel is the necessary rate anyway, and no matter what the smear campaign is. And also, like, the TV numbers are there. They can't fudge those. They can't hide those. We've seen the TV history to know what Florida State's worth from a brand perspective. But I do think you're right with the Sam Ponder thing. I do think it is a lot to do with the Title IX stuff that she spoke up with. The RG3, that's just the weird one to me. I think it just maybe it's coincidence that Sam Ponders has ties to FSU and happens to happen the same day. But RG3 was weird because, like you said, I mean, $17 million a year is ridiculous, first off, for a sportscaster. And no offense to the guy, I mean, get yours.
Get yours.
Somebody pay me $17 million.
Right.
But, and I think the thing is, though, like, there are some budget cut things to it. I'm not going to argue that because we've seen the history of them negotiating stupid contracts with a lot of their top personalities that are paying these guys millions and millions a year. That I just don't know that I don't know that you pay that.
Right.
But at the same time, he did have 2 years of his contract left, which is what I think I saw. And so it's like the day after you defend Florida State, you get fired all of a sudden. So maybe it was coming, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. It's just it's a weird situation. And, again, like you said, I think it just shows kind of where we're at in society, where you can have a guy like Paul Feinbaum who comes out and says stupid stuff to get attention because no one actually cares what he says. And can basically make fun of Florida State, but then you have a guy defend them, and he's the one that gets punished for it. Yep. So just a crazy situation, man. But, it is what it is. I had to put on the tinfoil hat for a day because it sure does feel like they're out to get us now. And I mean, honestly, with all these things going on, like we've talked about it before, I would probably rather be in the SEC just because of the fun matchups. But, give me Fox in the Big Ten. Let's get out of this inbreds ESPN, the SEC and all that. So, but with that being said, it's time to talk about some actual football. We'll get on to some defensive talk. First off, let me bring you a quick word from today's sponsor, and that is Alumni Hall FSU. Guys, we are like 2 weeks away from a home game in Doak Campbell Stadium. You're going to want to refresh your gear for this upcoming season. Unless you have a lucky shirt or a hat, then definitely don't give that up. But whatever is not your lucky shirt or hat, go get you a new one to go with it. And at Alumni Hall, they have a great selection of all the FSU gear you want, and you can get it at a great price by using code SPEAR to get 10% off. You can shop online, or you can shop in store at 1415 Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. So, getting to the defense, this is one that you're excited to talk about. I know when we talked about offense the other day, it was like, I'm excited about the offense, right? Of course, but there's a lot of like, man, I hope this works out. I hope that works out. The defense, I feel like you feel like maybe some things do need to work out now. They do need to pan out. But you feel like the floor is just really, really high for this defense, and I'm excited to talk about it. So with that being said, I first think that the thing that we need to do is put some respect on Adam Fuller's name.
Let's
go. Are you ready for this, Michael?
Okay.
I'm coming correct today, buddy.
Okay.
Are you ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
Adam Fuller, the Don of the defense, the honcho of halftime adjustments, the steward of stops, and if I may, the guardian of the goal line.
Oh, let's go. Let's go. Those are good.
I had to come correct today. And he is not to be confused with Mike Norvell, who is the emperor of the end zone. So that one slipped me. That one slipped me the other day. So I had to come correct today. But man, I really do think you have to put some respect on on Adam Fuller's name. This is a guy that a lot of people want to go on for a long time. And I think he has really shown his ability. I mean, just kind of looking back real quick, he took over a defense that had been ranked 90th and 66th. And yes, they took a dip in 2020. Again, that was a year that you had to coach over Zoom and all that crazy stuff.
That's right.
They took a dip to 105th, but then they got back up to 67th, where kind of he took things over at. And in the last 2 years, they put together back-to-back top 20 defenses, and that's pretty daggone impressive. So you got to be happy with what you've seen there. I know, we talked about just kind of making the joke of the halftime adjustments where things may start a little bit slow, but man, the way they turn it on in the second half, it's just hard to argue with. And, you look at the last 2 years, in 2022, they gave up an average of 20.6 points per game. And then last year was only 19.3 points per game, tied for 18th. So held them under 20. And again, if you adjust for that bowl debacle that, you didn't have half your defense there for, it was only 15.9 points per game. So this defense was pretty much elite last year. And I mean, you saw that like the highlights, they had the LSU game where they held the Heisman winner and the number one offense in the country to less yards than basically anybody in the SEC, even Alabama. They had the game against Louisville, which the defense we know was just unreal in that game. Florida, I think they held Florida to negative yards in the fourth quarter or something like that. So it was crazy, man. That was just a really, really good defense. And you lose a lot, but I think it's also very possible that this defense can reload. And we're going to get into reasons for that as well. But, even with Fuller, he had a top it was tied for 26th defense at Marshall, and he took Memphis from 94th up to 57th. So I think he's not, well, he's probably a big name now. I'm sure he's on some lists.
Oh,
You know, I actually thought he was going to go to Boston College when that came open. So looking at some other stat rankings here, just to kind of see where they excelled at. In the advanced rankings, this is like opponent adjusted and stuff like that. It was the 11th ranked defense. So right there knocking on the top 10. They have 40 plus sacks in the past 2 years. That's top 10 in both years, 46 last year. I mean, that's just, those pressure numbers are insane. And that's something that we missed for a long time. You know, there for a while, it was basically just Jermaine Johnson bringing pressure.
That's right.
And now we bring it from everywhere. 7th in tackles for losses with 100 tackles for loss last year.
Oof.
6th in third down defense. And one of the areas that I thought initially wasn't the greatest was 59th in red zone defense, but they were 27th in touchdown percentage allowed. And I think a lot of that has to do with that Adam Fuller kind of bend, don't break style defense.
Yeah.
Now, there is one area when we talk about areas you'd like to see him improve, and that gets down to strengths and weaknesses. So really, man, this defense, this pass defense has been lights out the past 2 years. 4th in 2022. 11th in pass defense in 2023. And to use really a better metric is God, this thing every time, man, like Miami championships, they just don't go together. In Phil Steele's pass defense rankings, which I like because it takes into account how good that passing offense is, home, away, things like that. They were number 1 in his pass defense rankings last year. So the pass defense has really just been shut down, locked down, DBU type of stuff for the past 2 years. And I think it's going to be the same this year.
Yeah.
But the one area that I would really like to see them improve is in their run defense. And I guess if you got to pick one of the two to take away, I'd rather probably give up a little bit of rushing yards than the pass. And it's not really been bad. It's just they were 72nd in run defense last year, 75th in 2022. So that's really the one area I'd like to see them improve. They did give up a good bit of explosive plays last year, which was something that we would also like to see them clean up. Tied for 82nd in plays over 20 yards. But again, this breaks down to what we just talked about. When you look at the pass plays over 20 yards, they were 21st in the country. When you look at run plays over 20 yards, they were 126. So we got 8 up by some long runs. And I do suspect that has a lot to do with facing, 5 or 6 mobile quarterbacks last year that were real legit dual threat guys. And you have a couple this year, but not quite as many. So I think that has a lot to do with it too. So really just looking at the overall defense the past 2 years, man, it's been all go. It's been all good stuff. Last year was a really dominant group. And I think when you look at the areas that I'd like to see him improve, it's just that run defense. And then also just not so much improve, but stay consistent in the pressure that they brought, the pass defense that they have had over the last 2 years. If you can carry those things over again to this season, man, this defense is going to be set up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what this defense was when Adam Fuller came in. Like you said, after the 2020 season where they total defense was 107th in the nation, rush defense was 97th in the nation, passing yards allowed was 98th, and scoring defense was tied for 105 at the end of 2020. Now, we all know 2020 was a terrible season, like that stuff. But you actually saw marketable improvement the next season. They went 66 in total defense, 55th in rush defense, 74th in passing yards allowed, and 68th in scoring defense. So you saw an improvement, but yet you didn't necessarily see it in the win total. And so we were all just frustrated because, you couldn't stop the run game. You're allowing these big passes. You had QBs scrambling all over the place. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then you started in the last 8 games of the season. Remember, they started 0-4 in 2021. They went 5-3 in the final 8 games. And in those 8 games, they had a chance to win almost every single game because you saw steady improvement, not just with the offense, but mostly with the defense. And then, of course, like you said, the dom of the defense, the what was the halftime adjustment one?
The honcho of halftime adjustments. I didn't have anything good for that one.
Halftime adjustments. No, the headman of halftime adjustments. Yeah, because that's one of the things that's been Adam Fuller's calling card.
Yeah.
The opposing offense will move the ball down the field. They may get a touchdown or a field goal, and you're just like, man, are we going to be giving up yards all day? And then next thing you know, they come out at halftime and they're completely shutting down the offense. They're completely doing things differently. I remember that Duke game. You know, Duke was just going up and down the field at Doak Campbell Stadium on that night game, and it was just like, okay, this is going to be a shootout. The offense is struggling right now. Oh no! And then next, you know, they came out after halftime, and boom, the strip had flipped. Even that's why in that game, if you remember, Mike Elko goes for it on fourth down. Why does he go for it on fourth down? Right there, he could have kicked the field goal because he understood that his team was tired. That defense was wearing them out. He knew if they didn't make that play, that fourth down right then and there, it was over. And sure enough, he was right. It was over.
It was over.
It was over. And so you have seen this remarkable improvement. I mean, right now, Florida State goes into the season. I know we're going to get to position previews, but right now, Florida State goes into the season as probably one of the top 5 defensive backfields in the country. Yeah. Like we people are afraid of our backfield now. You got AZ on one side, you got Frencho Cypress on the other side. I mean, and then that defensive line, yes, they lost Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, but it wasn't a retool. It was a reload, basically. Yeah. You know, they bring Patrick Payton back. They get Marvin Jones Jr. there. They get Saloa Leha in there. They get George Iwe from West Virginia. I mean, they just reloaded on that defense. They get the linebackers in, Justin Cryer, Cam Riley. They get all those guys in. So this is a chance for Florida State defense to be, dare I say, just slightly a bit better than they were last season, which is crazy to even think about.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point because when you talk about the rebuild versus reload, I think you start looking back to like the Alabamas of the world, and you're like, okay, well, there's no way they're going to be as good. They lost all this NFL talent. They lost their coordinator. They lost this coach or that coach or whatever, and they were just good again.
Right.
And so it's like you just, I think the perfect example of that is like, okay, look, who's this Jermaine Johnson guy? Is he going to be any good? Bam, he's NFL caliber guy. All right, well, surely you're not going to get 2 in a row with Jared Verse. Bam, first round NFL draft pick. All right, well, I don't know. This Patrick Payton guy, maybe, probably going to be a first round NFL draft pick. So it's like, man, I mean, it's just, you can never say never with being able to reload. And I think that does speak back to, even with Adam Fuller in the beginning, when you talk about like what we talked about with Mike Norvell, you have an offense built for playmakers. You didn't really have a lot of playmakers.
Right.
It was the same thing here. I mean, they had a little bit more, I think, leftover defensive talent there. But, I mean, this is where, like, you have a guy, and this is no dish on the guy because one was an unreal player at the time, and one I think will be an unreal player by the time he's done with his career at Florida State. But, you bring in Jermaine Johnson on the defensive end, and we'll get into position groups in a minute, but, like, this is a guy that was your defense. He was your defense.
He was the defense.
Him and Jamie Robinson and Keir Thomas were literally, it was probably 90% of the defense right there. Now you bring in a guy who's basically the same position, a rotational player from Georgia, and he's probably not going to start. He's probably going to be your defensive end number 2 behind Patrick Payton. So it just speaks to the level that defense has gotten to. And I will say, before we get into 2024, one of my favorite things about this defense is, when they got here, when Adam Fuller got here, he said that they looked at the defenses of old, Mickey Andrews style defense, fast, physical, aggressive. Man, that is the narrative of this team now. Yeah. They play fast, physical, and aggressive. They will come up and hit you in the mouth. They make big plays. And so, like, it's a fun defense to watch. Yeah. They get you excited. And so that's why I'm thinking that, as we transition into 2024, I think this turns into a good part of the conversation where you do talk about that returning production. And, we've had this conversation before on a different subject, not necessarily about our defense, but where returning production is great. Don't get me wrong. Like that. Usually, if you bring all your starters back, you expect to be as good or better the next year. But it doesn't always guarantee that. We talked about the offensive line in the offensive preview, had the most experience in all of college football, and they took a step back.
That's right.
If you bring back 100% of production on an 0-12 team, that's not as good as 50% production on a 12-0 team. And I don't necessarily hang my hat on returning production, but it is a big part of the game. And so as we look at 2024, I do want to the defense is going to be a little different. Like I'm more excited about the defense probably than I am the offense about just where their ceiling is at. But I do think there is a little bit of cold water you got to throw here. I think just to be honest. And, again, we definitely try and be positive on the show all the time. And I think, but you also have to be real and you have to talk about some things for what they are. And numbers don't lie. I mean, we can incorporate some garnet and gold glasses on here too, but You look at your returning production. It is 60%, 62nd in the country. Your returning tackles are down at 50.2%, 95th in the country. Your big play defense, which is like sacks, tackles for loss, interceptions, stuff like that, is down at 48.3%, which is 88th in the country. You lost a lot of really, really good guys on this defense. You already mentioned Jared Verse, Braden Fisk. Fabian Lovett is a guy I think that's very underrated, that's going to be missed. Even some of the depth in there that you lost on your defensive tackles, guys that are just looking for more playing time. You also lose a guy like your two linebackers that were great linebackers for you. I mean, they weren't great in the sense of being great, but they were great for your defense. They were the best we've had in a long time, right? You also lose a couple NFL guys out of the secondary. There's a lot to replace there. Now, I love a lot of the guys that you're bringing in to replace them, and we're going to get into personnel here in just a few minutes. But, you do have to keep in mind that there is some replacement value in there that you have to factor in. Are these guys, we think Darrell Jackson is going to be a monster.
Right.
We haven't seen it yet, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's still that in a little bit. But I was telling you before the show, knowing that you have some pieces to replace, but I think the floor is high with what you got, and I think the ceiling is really high with what we've seen this defense turn out to be. But I was telling you before the show, I think honestly, man, the most important segment of this show is the one we're about to talk about right now. And I think that is when you look at the different slate, because strength of schedule plays a really big factor in how your season goes. And so when I get to digging in and doing my research and whatnot on things, I let the numbers speak to me and try to keep my feelings out of it. And this was a bit of a red flag for me. I'm not going to lie. And so this is where I think it's important. So when you look at the 2023 scoring offenses, and if you remember, we did this yesterday for the last show we did for the offenses, where I think it was like the scoring defenses you had to face got a little bit tougher from like 63rd to 59th or something. Remember, it was only like 5 spots or something like that. So when you talk about the scoring offenses that you faced last year to this year, of course, again, remember, teams are allowed to get worse. Teams are also allowed to get better. And so when you look at the average scoring offense ranked last year, it was 68th in the country. This year, it is 39th. That is a sizable jump. When you look at top 25 offenses that you faced last year, it was only 1. This year, it's 4. When you look at the top 50 offenses, last year it was only 3. This year, it's 7. So you have a significantly tougher slate of offenses that you're going to face this year. And this is also one of the reasons why when I say they can get better or get worse, that I think this is kind of crazy, man. So this is the part that I was talking about was important. When we look at the offenses and we said, okay, well, we suspect they're going to be harder this year because you have different teams on the schedule. Those teams played better offense, whatever. But some of those teams could still get worse or better. So looking at last year, you have LSU was the same quarterback, year 2 guy won the Heisman. Miami was and this is the order of the offenses, the scoring offenses, they finished ranked. So yeah, Miami had a freshman backup, second start ever. Louisville was a year 1 quarterback in that system, but he was a veteran guy. Clemson was a year 1 starter at quarterback. He did play a little bit prior to that, but it was as a freshman. Virginia Tech was a year 1 quarterback that did not start that season. Florida was a freshman backup quarterback in his first start. Duke was a year 2 quarterback who got hurt and then went to their backup. Boston College was a year 1 quarterback making his second start. Syracuse was a year 3 quarterback. We know Schrader was very experienced. Southern Miss, year 1 quarterback. Wake Forest, year 1 quarterback. Pitt, year 1 quarterback on his 4th start. Now, again, looking at 2024, remember, we just said they have 3 more top 25 offenses and 4 more top 50 offenses. Memphis, same quarterback, 4-year starter. Notre Dame, new quarterback, but it's Riley Leonard, an experienced guy. SMU, same quarterback, now in year 2 as a starter. UNC, new quarterback, but you have one guy there who's played at multiple schools. Miami, new quarterback, but it's Cam Ward, very experienced guy. Georgia Tech, same quarterback, now year 2. Cal, same quarterback, now year 2. Clemson, same quarterback, now year 2. Florida, same quarterback, now year 2. Duke, new quarterback, it's Malik Murphy. I don't think he's going to be any better or worse than Riley Leonard was. And then BC, same quarterback, now year 2. So almost every team on your schedule has either a returning quarterback or a veteran quarterback in place. Malik Murphy is really the only one that hasn't played outside of the quarterback battle at UNC, and the 2 guys have played before. One of them hasn't played a lot. So you have a tougher slate of offenses that all have returning quarterbacks. So I think what you're going to face this year is going to be a lot tougher. When we talked about that pass defense and how good it's been, it was always a fair argument to say that you didn't face a lot of tough passing offenses. You didn't get the UNC last year and some of the better passing offenses in the ACC. So, man, I'll kick it to you to share some thoughts on that. But I think, to me, that is when we talk about everything that this defense can be. A lot of times when we go in and do the preseason predictions and all this type of stuff, and again, this is not like a brag. This is just a me showing the research. I pretty much picked Florida State in every game the way it turned out to be over the last 2 years. And a lot of that is because I know what we have, but then I focus on what the other teams have. And I think a lot of people they see the name and they associate that and they're done. Like, oh, we're going to beat them because they're, and then you don't look at that actual team. And so I think when you do look at the other team, you have a lot of good offenses this year with a lot of experienced quarterbacks, which is something that you just did not face last year. So I think the defense is still going to be good. I'm not saying they're not going to be good. I'm just saying that it may not be as good as last year, even though it has the potential to be better on paper. You're facing a much tougher slate of offenses in 2024.
Yeah. The defense is going to face, more advanced offenses this year. And depending on whether their starting quarterback at the beginning of the season is still in the game when Florida State plays them, the level of difficulty is going to go up. That's to be expected. I think where the optimism comes into play, though, is that while Florida State did lose production last year, it got better in talent. So yes, it lost production, and so production is down. But as every year, every team loses production. So you look at like the Alabamas and the Georgias, right? Back when Alabama, well, they're still kind of technically on their run, and Georgia's still technically on their run. But every year they lose significant production. But what is the difference? Why do they keep coming back every single year and still being one of the best defenses in the country? It's because they replaced the lost production with good talent. Right? Talent that's been in the system that's been developing over time. So that way it has become a true plug and play for those teams. Michigan's the same thing, for the run it's been on. Ohio State's the same thing for the run it's been on, right? They lose these significant productions to NFL, but then they also are replacing that with talent. Well, I would say Florida State is beginning to do the same over the last 3 years. Every time they've lost significant production, they've been able to replace it with enough talent to make the defense get better. And every year, the defense has gotten better and better. And so, yes, I agree with you. The offenses that they're facing this year are a lot tougher than the offenses they faced last year on a whole. The quarterbacks that they're facing this year are going to be second, third, most of them returning quarterbacks. The quarterback that they're facing to start the season was at Texas A&M and transferred. Had started the year rocky, but then kind of had the year close the year pretty good. I know we're going to do that preview here soon, but again, he was a turnover machine last year too. So they're also bringing back their own issues as well. And Florida State, yes, they lost production, but they also added talent. They backed it up with talent. And I think that talent, if coached well and put in the right schemes and the right play, can compensate for the production that they lost. And of course, we'll have to see how it turns out on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that part. I do think they have reloaded the talent in here. I think that, again, the reason I bring up the returning production numbers is because it can be hard to replace a lot of NFL draft picks. Now, I think they've done a good job with that. But, I think some of those are TBD until we see it get done.
Right.
I mean, it's like I said with the offensive preview with the TJ Ferguson, that's a massive freaking human who moves well and does great in fall camp.
Right.
I love what I'm hearing. I think he's going to be a great impact lineman for us. I don't always love relying on other fall camp reports that I haven't seen with my own eyes. So I go back and I look at the numbers, and some of his numbers just weren't that great. And so it's I like to, you just don't know until you know. We think Cam Riley's going to be good. I think we're going to need to hit on a few pieces this year that we brought in just because of that tougher slate of offenses. But I think my point with that segment was that this defense, they lost a lot. They can still be really good, like you said, because they reloaded with talent. I think it's just more, I guess what I'm saying is this defense may not finish as statistically high as last year's did but that doesn't mean it wasn't maybe a better defense. They just had
Correct.
a tougher slate of offenses that they're going to have to go against, and a lot of experienced quarterbacks. And I will say that a lot of these teams are returning 70 and 80% of their production. I didn't want to bore you guys with a lot of numbers, but a lot of them are. And the game one that you're coming out with, again, is a returning starter with 83% of production. And game two is another returning quarterback with 80% of production. So coming back around him. So you're going to have to, and that's on offense. That's not the entire team. You are going to have to be ready. Memphis game 3, 74% returning production, same quarterback. So it's going to be tough out of the gate. And I just think that they may not look as good on the stat sheet, but that doesn't mean they still can't be really good for Florida
State. They that absolutely true. First of all, they're going to have to show up every game, right? I mean, they can't just show up and think that, that the spear on the helmet is going to scare the team away. No, they have to show up. They have to be ready to play. They have to scheme it up right. Adam Fuller's got to call the right plays. Those players got to make the right plays. Remember, the helmet, the play doesn't make the helmet makes the play, or however Jimbo used to say that.
The exact opposite of that, but
the exact opposite of that, exactly. And so, they're going to have to get on the field and do it. And their stats might not they might not be a top 5, potentially not a top 5 passing defense. They might be, top 10, top 15, whatever it may be. The fact of the matter is that while the stats might be different, the talent has gotten better. And if the talent can show up on the field, then you feel confident that that defense is going to be able to hold these offenses that'll be much better. I absolutely agree with you there, to a space to where our offense can make some damage as well. Yes, I think there'll be more games than we saw last year that'll be a lot closer. But I have confidence that this defense can hang with the best of them, if not be one of the best of them.
Oh, I definitely agree. And I think this will be, I have a little side project that I've been doing once a week, the Fourth and Florida show with some other guys talking about college football in the state of Florida. And we were ranking our defenses yesterday, and I put Florida State on top in the state, and that was even above Miami. Now I know that has a lot to do with the offenses, but again, I think really what I'm maybe trying to do here is, because we just did our offensive preview, now we're doing our defense, and next we go into the schedule. I think it's painting that holistic picture. So if you're watching this episode, make sure that you watch all 3, so that way you can understand in the next one why we're saying some of the things that we're saying. Because again, when you look at, the defenses should be slightly better this year. That's kind of what we looked at in the offensive preview. The offenses that they're going to face should be probably, I would say, almost significantly better this year, with a tougher schedule, with a lot of stuff to replace. There's a lot of people when, and we're not going to spend time on this because we're going to get into that on the next episode. But when people are like, 12-0, we're going 16-0 into the national championship. I'm like, you got to understand how hard it was, how, that Miami game was close. I know it should have been another, that fluke touchdown at the end or whatever. But, some of those games, we got the scare against BC and whatnot last year. And that was an unreal team against a not super great schedule. And so this year you have a team that's replacing a lot against a tougher schedule.
That's right.
It's going to play into the win-loss predictions, but that'll be next episode. So I'm just kind of painting a complete picture here. But as we look further into what this 2024 defense can be, the S&P Plus projection, which is like an advanced stat model, does for I don't know what all it does. Some college football science, but either way, it's a pretty good one. It's Bill Connolly. His stuff is usually pretty good. He does project Florida State to have the 10th ranked defense in the country. And I mean, if you can have a top 10 defense, forget about everything I just said, because you're doing
something right.
That's going to be a daggone good defense. Because if you can finish top 10 against that slate of offenses, I mean, this defense is going to be all that and a bag of chips. And of course we do. I mean, I do think they're going to be good. I do think they are going to be a top 25 defense in the country. Now looking at, let's try and get through this one, Michael. Phil Steele's,
look at you,
got it, nailed it. Projections or his unit rankings. So he has our D line ranked at 15th in the country, number 2 in the ACC. I would say with that, I probably would go maybe a little bit higher on the defensive line. I think top 15 is probably fair, maybe from a depth standpoint in the entirety of the room. But I think, man, your starting 4 is probably top 10 in the country. When you look at linebackers, he has them at top 40. He did have Cam Riley mentioned in there, number 6 in the ACC. Man, I guess if you got to have a top 40 linebacking crew, you'd like to see it maybe a little bit better. But considering where we probably thought we were coming into the season with Lundy in the portal, no Cam Riley. And so I guess I can take top 40 there. Again, 4-2-5 defense is your primary set. So you only need two. You only need two. Defensive backs, he has us at number 7 in the country, number 1 in the ACC, tied with Clemson at number 1 in the ACC. I think that's pretty fair. I would probably put our DB unit in the top 5. I also understand that there's a lot of other good secondaries out there, so you're getting competitive at that top end. We don't really know who our second safety is yet.
Right.
But I do think they are top 10 secondary by all means and the best in the ACC. So I agree there. And then we are going to wrap special teams into this as well. He does have special teams at number 13 in the country, number 2 in the ACC, which, again, keep in mind, that's going to be a big part. When we just talked about all the things that equal closer games, that could be a big part of it. Now, his stat projections for the year, points per game. Last year, we gave up, remember, 19.3 or 15.9 adjusted with the bowl. He has us giving up 26.6 points per game. That is plus 7.3 points on the regular total and plus 10.7 points on the adjusted without the bowl total. And if you look back at last year, that would be the 68th ranked scoring defense. So, man, that's a tough pill to swallow. It's the crazy thing is, I mean, even if you adjust for the Orange Bowl, it's over 10 points. That's a pretty big difference. Yeah. If you leave the Orange Bowl in there, that's only about a 6-point difference. So that's not super hard to understand there. I don't know that Florida State's going to have the 68th best scoring defense. That just doesn't feel right to me. No. I'm thinking you're probably going to be able to. You also don't really have a whole lot of easy games this year either. That's right. You know what I mean? You don't have North Alabama and Southern Miss. Right. You got Charleston Southern, who's still an FCS, but you get Memphis this year. That's no joke. That's a good offense. So I still would maybe go around the 24-point range. I don't know that you hold the teams under 20 this year, but I don't know, man. 68th in scoring defense, I'm not buying that. I think you're going to have at least top 40, top 50 in your scoring defense. And, hey, total defense, all the yards and stuff, that's great. Don't matter. Like we said yesterday, if you have 800 yards and 3 points, you probably lost the game. So congratulations.
Exactly.
Football, you didn't do anything with it. Pass yards per game, 208 this year is his projection. Last year was 180. That's plus 28 yards a game. That, I think, is probably fair with the quarterbacks that you have coming back. Rush defense, giving up 155. Last year was 152, so actually 3 less yards. Hey, that's an improvement. That's what we wanted to see. Maybe they can keep some teams under that as well. I think not having so many mobile quarterbacks, even though you have a number of them between freaking Castellanos, who tore us up last year.
That's right.
And then, like you said, Haynes King in game 1, maybe you could see it. Yards per game, 363. We gave it 332 last year, down 31 yards a game. So it's going to be, again, man, or excuse me, plus 31. So it's going to be, those numbers are interesting. I have to argue with the 68th in scoring defense. Of course, you don't know what that would have ranked in 2024, but that's where it would have been. But I think there's a lot of people that do look at what you lost and then the offenses you're going to have to face that are kind of forming what we were talking about earlier. But still, overall, just in those predictions, I mean, S&P Plus has you in the top 10. So I'm liking those numbers as well. And again, I mean, all of your position groups are top 40, top 15, and top 10. So that looks pretty good there. And again, you're number 1, number 2, and number 6 in the ACC. And at the end of the day, you're really just trying to win the ACC this year.
Right. Now, listen, Jesse, I'm not saying that Florida State's going to be, number 1 across all defensive categories. That would be, I don't know if there's ever been a team that's been number 1 on all the major categories across defense. I don't know, man. Maybe that Georgia team from 20, what was that team?
21, I think.
21. That was like uber, like one of the most dominant teams I've ever seen. Maybe even the 99, undefeated Florida State defense. That was a defense too.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying they're going to be number 1 across all categories. But I will say that if you look at the trend, okay, of an Adam Fuller defense, every year they've gotten better, right? Yeah. And every year they've lost a significant piece of the defense and everybody, including me, would say, well, how are they going to replace this? How are they going to replace that? Okay, there definitely has to be a step back this year, right? There definitely has to be a step back this year. But they went from 107, 66, 14, and okay, maybe kind of a step back to 28th in total defense. That what I have, the numbers, the research I have here, they went from 98th, 74, 4th, and 11th in passing offense, 97th, 55, 74, 70 in rush offense, which we've already said needs to be better. And then tied for 105th, 68, 20th, and 18 in scoring defense. Third down defense, they went 104, 86 in the country to 36 to 6 They were the best. They were top 10 third down defense last season. Okay. And so I just, maybe right now, maybe when game one happens, and if Georgia Tech starts throwing all over them and running all over them, I might be like, all right, there might be something wrong. But until I see it, I have to go with the numbers. Like you go with the numbers. I have to go with the numbers. And the numbers are showing that there's a trend of getting better and better. And not even just getting better, but replacing talent that has left with talent that's coming in. Talent that Jermaine Johnson came in with very little stats.
Right.
Jared Verse came in with like D80 stats, right?
Yeah.
And so did Braden Fisk. And so you couldn't really count them as like, oh, these are D1 Power 5, Power 4 stats. And again, they proved over those years just get better and better and better. And so I'm sitting here today saying, yes, their offense is going to be harder. The stats are saying that there's a potential for them to struggle a little bit. Phil Steele, who basically says we're going to give up 7.3 points more points than we did last year. Okay, that might be the case, but is he also accounting for the fact that, is he just basing that on the fact that the talent lost? Or is he also thinking about the talent coming in and the production of the hit rate, as we've talked about before on previous shows, of how they've been hitting on these players? So, that to me, that's where I kind of like, yes, those numbers are important and they're good to keep your eye on. But man, just by touch and feel, which doesn't always win you games, this defense could be just as good, if not slightly better than it was the previous season.
Yeah, and I will say that Phil Steele does spend about an hour on the phone with every Power 5 or really every head coach. So they go over the entire the whole ordeal. And so he does have a good understanding. And I'm not trying to sound like a pessimist here. I don't want to sound like I think Florida State's defense is going to be bad, because I'm really excited about this defense. I think it's going to be the strength of the team. I think it's going to be defense, special teams, running game, and then we'll figure out the rest. I think that's where you're going to build your foundation this year. Like I said, I just think my point is you may find yourself in closer games this year because you still are replacing people. And I still think there are some areas where, frankly, you have to stay healthy. You don't have a choice, or this defense is going to be in trouble if you lose one or two guys. And so I do think that, like your interior defensive tackle, as we transition into basically the position groups now, that is the one we can start with. But I do want to say that I am keeping an overall positive sentiment, because I do think that this defense is going to be the leading unit of this team. I think it's just, again, it's like painting that whole picture like we talked about, where you just have a tougher slate that you're going to face. So again, when you hold the tickets up at the end of the year and you're like, okay, it was 20 or 18th this year, it might be 28th this year. But that doesn't mean your record wasn't still as good, because you just, maybe you won that game 31-28 instead of 34-20 last year or something like that, So getting into the position groups is why this is where you do start to get excited when you talk about the guys on this roster, because, again, like you talked about, you can focus on the guys that left, but I think really the talk has to be about the guys that are here. Now, they have big shoes to fill, so we're hoping that they do that. But, starting up front with the defensive line, I will say one thing that does give me some hope, because this is kind of the area where I feel like you maybe got hurt the most with what you lost. Good thing is, no defensive lineman last year played more than 50% of the snaps. So, one, you have built more depth by having more playing time for those younger guys. And then two, the weight of the guys that are leaving isn't going to be as heavily felt. It's not like, Jared Verse is leaving after playing 90% of the defensive snaps, and Braden Fisk played 90% of the defensive snaps. So I think that does help your case to be like, okay, well, 50% of our snaps was not with those guys last year, and the defense was still pretty good. But when you look at the defensive line, you're starting 4 to 6 guys. This is probably, it's hard to be more excited than that secondary. But this, man, it's close. I get giddy when I talk about this defensive line. First off, let's start in the interior. You have Josh Farmer, who has 790 snaps of experience, 6'3", 318 pounds, second team All ACC last year. Then you have Daryl Jackson, who's played 681 snaps, 6'5", 330 pounds. Both of these guys were on Bruce Feldman's college football freaks list for how big they are and how they move. So I think you're going to have one of the best D-tackle duos in the country. Now, the thing to remember about Daryl Jackson, too, is he did play at Miami. He did play at Maryland. Then he ended up at Florida State, where we know he could not play last year. He was not eligible until the Georgia game. But the thing is, he still practiced. It's not like he was sitting over there eating popcorn and waiting on the NCAA 25 video game to come out. He was
like
he was
us.
working. Right. He stayed engaged. He stayed working. He could have left, with those measurables. He could have tested the NFL draft. So he stayed in shape. He has a year of understanding of how this defense works. He just couldn't do it on Saturday. So it's almost like he's not even a transfer at this point. It's almost like he's a guy he's a redshirt guy coming into his first year at FSU. So I like that as well. Again, you're talking about almost 1,600 combined, 1,500 combined snaps here. Over 650 pounds of grown man in the middle. That is going to be a lot for any team to deal with. Now, are these two guys like full on, like a penetrating chaos machine like Braden Fisk? Probably not, but I think with that size and the strength and the athletic ability, you're not going to be able to do much up the middle against this defensive line. Now, behind them, I do get a little bit concerned with who you have there, but I do think while no defensive lineman played more than 50% of the snaps last year, that might not be the case this year, just because I don't think you don't have Fabian Lovett coming in anymore. But you do have Grady Kelly. He has played over 1,000 snaps in college at Colorado State, 6'2", 300 pounds. So he's got size. And, again, I know we said we weren't really excited about him in the spring after the performance that we saw. But again, some guys turn it on Saturdays. And we talked about this before. If you can get 10 to 15 snaps a game from him, I think that's probably good enough. Daniel Lyons has 182 snaps of experience, 6'4", 290. That's another guy. KJ Sampson did play 50 snaps last year, 6'3", 300 pounds. We saw him have a good spring. So I think you have some backups in the middle. Durajaye, of course, 6'4", 278, 292 snaps, can slide into the middle to help you at defensive tackle. My concern with that group is that past the ones, the step down is pretty sizable. And I think that's where we say, when I said earlier that I think you have to have one or two guys that have to stay healthy. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. These two have to stay healthy, because if they're not your starter, I think that's going to be a little bit of a weakness in the middle. But I love that interior defensive group. And then when you look at the defensive ends, again, Patrick Payton, man, I just think Patrick Payton is going to be he's going to be the next great one out of Florida State at defensive end. 6'5", 254. He's added some mass this year. He's got 991 snaps of experience now. ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year his freshman year. I saw a thing. I think he has the most PBUs of because he's so long and gets the blocks. I think he had most PBUs of any defensive lineman in the country. Probably more than half our defensive backs, to be honest, which is crazy. I think he can be that first team all ACC type of guy. I think he's going to step into that role. I think starting across from him is going to probably be Sione Loholeha to start with. Over 1,000 snaps of experience, 6'3", 260, second team all Pac-12 selection last year. This is a guy that may not be that home record type of defensive end, but he's good against the run. He's we've heard that in fall camp. He's good at pressure. He doesn't get a lot of sacks, but again, I think when you look at the guys playing around him, Marvin Jones Jr., which we talked about, 300 snaps of experience. I think he's just one of those quiet workers, man. I think he's gonna, when the lights come on, I think he'll be ready. He may not be Jared Verse year one, Jermaine Johnson year one. It may take him some time to get into that role, but I think he's going to be an impact player for you this year. That's an NFL body type of guy. Yeah, Byron Turner Jr. now has 300 snaps under his belt, 6'4", 250, had his best season last year, where I talked about Durajaye, who can play outside for you. Jaden Jones is a defensive end to look out for, 6'5", 250, JUCO guy who was dealing with an injury last year, only played 59 snaps. And then you have Aaron Hester out there as well, some other guys. You at the defensive end, you have an embarrassment of riches. To be honest, you have 4 to 6 guys I think that could start for Division I teams pretty much in any of the Power 5 conferences. So, man, this defensive line, it has the potential to be another havoc-creating, home-wrecking, just I dare you to try it type of defensive line. And I can't wait to see it, man.
Yeah, this defensive line is going to be, I think, I won't go ahead. I won't say they're going to be better than last year's version of the defensive line, but I think they'll hold their own. I think they'll be dominant. I think they'll be able to get pressure on the quarterback. I don't think, again, one of the great things about last year's defense was because of how good that front four, that front five was. Adam Fuller didn't have to send a lot of blitz packaging. I mean, he did blitz, but he didn't have to send a lot. It wasn't like an overly crazily, I think it's the Miami defensive coordinator who they blitz like 70% of the time, if I remember correctly, that stat. And so, like, Adam Fuller didn't have to do that because he could get pressure with just front four. I mean, you saw that in the ACC championship game. That front four was dominating Louisville's offense.
Jared Verse, he hits dudes with dudes.
Dudes, exactly.
Exactly.
Now, so I don't think they'll be as dominant as that defensive line was last year, but I think they'll be good. I think adding Daryl Jackson finally into the mix. I mean, you've heard, again, yes, these are practice reports. But if we're to believe that this offensive line from Florida State is supposed to be, heads above better, then the fact that this defensive line and Daryl Jackson in particular were wreaking havoc on that. I mean, either that gives you great confidence for the defensive line or great worry about the offensive line.
Right.
I mean, this is just I heard one person say this is like an NFL level defensive line all the way through. Like not that every person is a first round draft pick, but it has defense, it has NFL level skill on that defensive line. I think Daryl Jackson is going to be a huge part of that. I think Patrick Payton, of course, is going to be anchoring one of the ends there, the long arm. I think this year, if they can get a better pass rush, last year, it was almost as if he was like, okay, I'm going to be the guy that kind of creates the havoc and then gets back, gets the PBUs, and Fisk and Verse are going to get in and get the sacks. I think this year you might see a little bit of reverse of that. I think the other side is going to try to do their thing, and they're going to try to free up more of Patrick Payton to get in the backfield more. But you also know that those offenses are going to probably try to double team him or chip him with a tight end or a running back there. So he's going to see extra attention this year. So it's going to be really up to that other side of the rotation to actually step in and make them pay attention. I actually think you're going to continue to see the rotation. I would agree with you. I don't know if it's going to be as much as it was last season because they had a good, really, really, really good two deep. I think your first team is really good, and I think your second team is probably just good. And so I think you'll probably see that rotation kind of shrink just a little bit, but I don't think they're gonna veer from that. I think Mike Norvell and Adam Fuller have seen the success of that. Again, we talked about this last season, how Georgia and Alabama have they basically begun this trend, and now a lot of teams are trying to follow suit of it because it allows you to play more and more defensive ends. They actually get D linemen. They actually get significant time. They're in there on crucial downs. I mean, you would see last year that, the offense would be just driving our defense. And then finally they get a third down. Then we'd switch to the third down and then they'd get out. And you're like, why did you put them there in the beginning?
Yeah.
It's because they were preparing them for this season. They're always looking ahead. And so I think this defensive line is going to be good, really good. I don't know if the sack numbers are going to be as good as they were last year.
I
think we'll get pressure. I think we'll get decent pressure and hopefully force, timing issues, bad mechanics, all of those things. But I don't know if we'll be able to replicate the amount of actual sacks we were able to get last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know that we create as many sacks. I do think they will be probably better against the run with having more kind of like edge setters, the massive defensive tackles in the middle. And I do agree. I think they will rotate. I just think you'll see more snaps from the top two because of that gap, or at least in pressure situations. I think you would want those two on the field for the big time situations. But again, I mean, that way you build that depth. You get those guys more in sync for later in the season when you got a Clemson, a Miami, and a Notre Dame. So I think you got to get them up to speed relatively quick. But I think it will be the anchor of the defense. I think it's really just kind of flip-flop from last year. Last year, you had two really good defensive ends, and then you didn't have a whole lot behind them.
In the middle,
But the middle you felt good about. This year, it's kind of like the middle, you don't have you have the top two and then kind of a mixture in between them or behind them. But the defensive ends, I mean, you can bring in you got 6 defensive ends you feel could be a
That's right.
starter. So it just kind of flip-flopped from last year to this year. But, man, I still think this defensive line is going to be the anchor of this group. I think they'll be better against the run, and I do think they're still going to create havoc when it comes to the pass because, I mean,
That's right.
like you said, Patrick Payton's probably going to get the Jared Verse treatment this year.
That's right.
Where you're going to get chipped and doubled and things like that. But that's going to open things up for a lot of the other guys,
That's
and
right.
there's a lot of other talented guys this year. So looking back behind them with the front seven at your linebackers, this is a position where, coming into the spring camp, we were actually like, man, or really at the end of the last season, you were like, well, this could be a problem next year if we don't go get some help. And then they didn't really go get a whole lot of help. We went and got Sean Murphy at one point. And then adding Cam Riley was really the big add. I think that and getting DJ Lundy back out of the portal really just flipped your perception of this room. I mean, when you look at DJ Lundy, he has 1,460 snaps of experience, and that is all at Florida State. And when, I asked Mike Norvell at Media Days, like, what is the difference between having that talented team or that experienced team? DJ Lundy was the first name that came out of his mouth. He said, look, we are experienced. Guys like DJ Lundy, they may not have been the quote-unquote starter, but he's played since he was a true freshman. And so now this guy has almost 1,500 snaps in Adam Fuller's defense. So he knows what to do there. I would imagine he's probably going to be the guy with the headset in the helmet calling your plays this year. But 6'1", 240, second highest graded linebacker against the run per PFF last year. Number 17 in tackle grade, number 20 in PFF grade in the Power 5 with a minimum of 200 snaps. Number 5 in lowest missed tackle percentage. I mean, he's a daggone good linebacker. Not the greatest in coverage. I mean, you can kind of look at him and tell he's just a massive human being. Like I've always said this about DJ Lundy. If you could chisel a linebacker out of stone, it would look like DJ Lundy.
You're right.
Looked like a college linebacker. And he always gets praised for Mike Norvell for that. But, the coverage is maybe where you lack a little bit here. But against the run, I mean, he's going to be a force in the middle there. And then you look at Cam Riley, 948 snaps. We know he started his career at Auburn. But again, man, this is so crazy. 6'5", 242 pounds. That's a lot of human being.
That's a boy.
And that's going to really help over the middle when you're trying to get them passes over the middle. 6'5", he can snag those right out of the air. Now looking back at Auburn, again, like I said, the fall camp reports have been amazing, and it feels like he has really elevated this room. But I always like to see what you did in a game time situation, and his coverage numbers were not the best. So we'll see. They said he's improved in the fall, so hopefully that is something that he improved on. But he did have a 5% missed tackle rate in 2023, which is very low. So sure tackler, big guy, SEC experience. I'm loving what I see there. And then, of course, you have Omar Graham Jr. did play 268 snaps. Didn't grade out so well. So, but he's got some experience. He's still growing in the system. You got Sean Murphy there as well. Didn't play a whole lot at Alabama. We kind of heard he's a serviceable guy through the fall camp. Juice Cryer and Blake Nicholson both played around 100 snaps last year. Did not grade out that well, but they were both really young players. But both of these guys have had good camps, especially Juice Cryer. He has been kind of one of the talks of the linebackers in fall camp. So, I think you got two guys that you really like in Lundy and Cam Riley. Then I think you kind of have the rest. That's kind of how I look at this group. You have two top guys, then you have the rest. And if you can just get another two guys out of that, I think Juice Cryer is a guy that, from what we've heard, and again, I hate relying on other people's opinions, but what you've heard, he's a guy that knows the scheme. He knows where to line up. He's always in the right place at the right time. He's just, the athletic ability is his only limiter. And so, you may want to be careful with having him against Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, and things like that, where you get him in coverage with a fast receiver. But he can be a big contributor on this defense. And Blake Nicholson, I mean, this is a guy with a huge ceiling.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, man, when are we going to see it come to fruition? And we've seen some flashes. It's just now you need to do it on a more consistent basis. But I think you have two that you really like, and I think you have 2 to 3 between Sean Murphy, Omar Graham, Juice Cryer, and Blake Nicholson that you feel like can be contributors for you. And again, like we said, this is not to diminish their play or the position, but in a 4-2-5 defense, if you had to pick a weakness, it would be linebacker. And, when I was talking about this on that Florida show the other day, the thing about the defense is, like, now that they've got this linebacker position to where it's at, I don't feel like you can point to a weakness on this defense. You have strengths and you have weaknesses, but I don't think it's a weakness overall. Like, the linebackers aren't as strong as the defensive line in the secondary, but I don't think it's a weakness anymore. I think this defense is good across the board and great in some areas.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think the linebacker I don't think We don't have and I don't mean offense to the boys out there. You know, I love you guys, but we don't have elite linebacker play. We don't have linebacker
No,
play like we see at Alabama or Georgia or even a Michigan or Ohio State. We don't have that kind of play. What we've
right.
had over the last couple of seasons
We
is
don't have Marvin
productive.
Jones
We
trolling
don't.
around out there.
That's right. We got his boy, but we don't have
Yeah.
him. We what we have is productive linebacker play, meaning that they've done just enough to be serviceable to make an impact. I mean, you know, last year obviously with Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune, you know, they were able to make significant plays at significant times when we needed them. But other than that, most of the time you didn't really hear much about them because that defensive line and the deep and the defensive backs were making all the plays. I think this year, again, I think if I had to project who you're starting to in that 4-2-5 is going to be, you're looking at probably DJ Lundy and Cam Riley. That's the most, those are the names we've obviously heard the most with, even though DJ was out, he was pretty much penciled in as a returning player and probably most experienced. But I think what you got now is you got, like you said, serviceable depth. You have Omar Graham, who's played a lot of snaps last year. You got Blake Nicholson, who's getting better and better, who played a lot of snaps last year. You bring in Sean Murphy, who was a serviceable backup last year. And then, of course, Juice Cryer, as you mentioned. You also have him. You also got DeMarco Ward, who's a redshirt freshman coming into this year, who probably will see more time on special teams, but, you know, in those moments could get some snaps there. And so you're going to see, I would imagine that you're going to see a lot of that 4-2-5. But then what we did see towards the end of the season more so was Fuller going to that 4-3. And when he goes to that 4-3, that's where you get kind of worried because a 4-3 is linebacker dependent. Like the 4-3, it's all about the linebacker play. That's where it becomes worrisome because do you have a true third person that you're going to trust in crunch time if you go to that 4-3? Yeah. If you stick with that 5-2, then you always have your starters, your number ones on the field at that time with what I'm projecting to be DJ Lundy and Cam Riley. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see like how well, you know, how well DJ Lundy has recovered from the supposed injury or the dink he's had throughout fall camp. And then also, is Cam Riley what we've been hearing about? Is he actually the linebacker we hear about? And then what steps has Blake Nicholson and Omar Graham taken in this offseason and the preseason fall camp to grow their game more?
Yeah, I agree, man. I think you still, like you said, you have two good ones that you feel like you can rely on that can elevate your defense. You look at DJ Lundy. This is the guy that was third in tackles on FSU last year with 54 total tackles. And I'm looking at him up right now. And he played, 80 to 100 snaps less than Kalen DeLoach and Tatum Bethune. So, again, a very productive linebacker. Cam Riley had 32 total tackles last year and only started one game at Auburn.
That's
so,
right.
I only played 300 snaps, a little over 300 snaps last year. So, again, I mean, these guys can be productive in that starting role. Another year of experience, another year in the defense. I think it's DJ Lundy, kind of like we talked about with Toa Philly. He's kind of been that second, third type of guy his whole career. Now it's time for him to be, LB1, as you want to call it. So, with the linebackers, like you said, I'm not going to sit here and say we got Marvin Jones rolling around out there, Derek Brooks. I don't think we have those type of guys. I don't know that we have any All-Americans out there.
Smith,
right.
Jeez.
But I would say that at least even Ernie Sims, but I would even say that
he's on the coaching staff though.
Right. And maybe we can suit him up. He looks like he can still play too. I will say that I think from the spring to now, I feel night and day better about this linebacker group. So this is another position where I think you're going to need those top two guys to stay healthy because I think once you get past them, things get a little bit questionable, which, that was kind of the way it was last year anyway. You had three that you liked and the rest were a little bit questionable too. So now going to something that's not really a question mark, and that is the defensive backs group. This is hang your hat, DBU, locks and keys, no fly zone, all that type of stuff. This is what it's all about. This is where I think the strength of your defense, the strength of your team is going to be next year. And a lot of that has to do with the experience and just the raw talent level. Obviously, to start with, you have Azareye'h Thomas, who is a guy that most of us, including Mike Norvell, including a lot of people, project to be an All-American guy. You hate to put such lofty expectations on somebody, but there's a lot of Jalen Ramsey comparisons going on right now. And if he can be that type of player, man, that's going to be huge for this defense. And, the thing is, like, he's only played 2 seasons and he wasn't he played a lot as a freshman. We saw some of the growing pains with playing him as a freshman, but you knew that he just moved different than everybody on the field. So you had to get him on there. he's now had 820 snaps in the past 2 years. So he's got a lot of experience. And he's gotten better both years. I mean, gave up a 68.8% completion percentage in 22. That number dropped to 48.8% in 2023, and he was targeted 25 more times.
Yeah.
So he got a lot heavier workload and actually did better with it. Like I said, he went from 41 targets or from 16 to 41 targets and only allowed 9 more receptions. So, I mean, you saw that jump from year 1 to year 2. And now if he can take another jump into year 3, man, it's going to be good. He also, even on 25 more targets, only allowed the same number of touchdowns with 2 last year. PBUs were up 5 from 1 to 6. And his PFF coverage grade jumped from 63.8 up to 78.7. So, man, it was a really good season for him last year, even though he wasn't in a starting role. But I think this year, man, it's going to be like AZ Island out there. I mean, you're gonna see a big season from him. I'll be a little bit sad because it'll probably be his last one if he has that All-American type of season. He'll probably go into the draft. But, man, I think this is going to be a guy that can lock you down out there. Super excited to see AZ out there. And then at the other corner position, we already know is going to be Fentrell Cypress. He played 606 snaps at FSU in 2023, 1,593 snaps as a college player overall. So much experience. And, there was times where, like, we talked about what he did at Virginia where he was looking really good. And then at Florida State, we felt like he was still good, maybe not quite as he was at Virginia. But I did some looking, and his completion percentage only came up by 5%, 45 in 22 to 50 in 23. But he only played 9 games in 2022, and they had tougher competition in 2023. So that's just, I think, tougher competition, more games, longer season. But he's had a great fall camp. I mean, there's people that are saying he's having, like, I hate to say we got 2 I'd love to say we have 2 All-American corners, to be honest, but that kind of All-American type of camp. And if he can turn out to be that type, man, 2 lockdown corners. I mean, this guy's played a lot of football. So I'm absolutely loving what you have at the 2 corners out wide there. And then, of course, behind them, you have some guys like Quindarius Jones is a name that Mike Norvell, I swear I hear him say that name every time he talks.
Yep.
And then, the younger guys too, you got Amarion Cooper that can provide some depth out there. You have a lot of the younger guys. Charles Lester is a guy I think you'll see this year. Some of the other DBs that we've heard about through fall camp. But, man, I think like with the linebackers, those are your 2 guys.
Yep.
And those are 2 lockdown guys. I think that's as good as it gets. I think that's one of the best cornerback duos. Probably the best in the ACC, one of the best in the country. So, man, tell me about these corners, and then we'll start talking about some safeties and the nickel position after that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, AZ, Fentrell, lock it down, throw out the pencil, throw the keys away. They've got those 2 corner positions locked down. They're going to be, I would suspect that they're going to be even better than they were last season. Obviously, the competition is going to be a little bit harder going up against better receivers this year, but I would suspect they're going to win their fair share of battles. I think that the conversation is really around that slot corner, where Jarian Jones was at last year, who took over that position, that star rover kind of corner and locked it down. And now this year there's been a battle for it. And based on what I've been reading and seeing in the practice report, I think your boy Duke is about to take that position.
Really?
Duke Cooper. Yeah. I mean, Mike Norvell has mentioned him over and over in that nickel slot there, and how that he has felt like he's played a lot better there in that position. And so remember, before he transferred out, they had moved him to safety, which is where he really, he had that incredible freshman season, got moved to safety, struggled, transferred out, came back in. And it seems like they've been working him at both safety and that nickel corner, but it seems a lot like he might. Now, again, opening day, that could be totally different, but based on, this is just my projection, based on what I've heard and seen, it looks like he might be opening day starter at that nickel slot corner position. Yeah, but I think you actually have good depth, Jesse, behind them too. I mean, you got Ricky Knight. I mean, you got Kai Bates. You got all these guys on there that can actually step in and fill in the rotation there around them. And then, of course, I know we'll get to safety there in just a second. So I really like our corner situation. I like it even better than I liked it last year. And last year I really liked it, because Ricardo Green was on the other side of that. I think this is going to be, again, I just have a lot of confidence. I know the offenses are going to be worse or better this year. But I still think this is a top 10, at least top 10 passing defense.
Yeah, I think when AZ Thomas, when you look at him versus Renardo, like Renardo, you knew could be good. Then he turned out to be great his final year. AZ was a guy, like, when you saw him come in as a recruit, I mean, you were like, this is going to probably be the next guy unless something
Yeah.
happens, along the way. And now it's that time. And you've seen the flashes. You've seen it on the film that he can be that guy. And you're just hoping now with a starting role. I mean, he was basically a starter last year.
Right.
But yeah, I think you're going to see him step into that big role. And at nickel, it is interesting because, we had talked for a long time. We thought it was going to be Earl Little Jr.
Yeah.
And then now you hear about Amarion Cooper. And I was just pulling him up. Yeah, I mean, in 2021 as a freshman, he had a 73.9% grade as a corner, 83.4 against the run. Coverage grade was 72.3. That was great. Then the numbers really took a dive in 2022. They were a little bit better in certain areas in 2023 out at Colorado, which again, in the Pac-12 at the time that they were playing there, they had a lot of good passing offenses.
That's
We
right.
did talk about that. Which, that's kind of a train wreck out there in Colorado anyway. So, but I think it's good to have that depth, because when you talk about that position, obviously Jerrion Jones was a massive player there for you. And, again, talk about a guy that turned his career around.
That's
but
right.
With Earl Little Jr., this was the one where I was kind of like, I feel so excited about what he can be, but then you look and he's only played 21 snaps at Alabama. So there's just a lot of unknown there.
Yeah.
But I will have to say that the word coming out of Alabama when he transferred was there was a lot of people that thought he should have been in that starting position.
That's right.
And he just, for some reason, he wasn't. And there was people that thought they made a mistake by doing that. So it's kind of like the talent versus the experience. And I want to say Duke Cooper was a 4-star coming out of high school too. I'm not 100% sure on that, but this is a guy that has talent. I mean, we've seen that. He has playing experience. He's been in this defense. So I think having that depth and competition is something that you'd like to see, because if maybe if you feel like Earl Little Jr. should be out there, but then the lights are maybe a little too bright for him, you have a guy who's been under the lights.
Right.
If maybe Duke Cooper starts out there because he has the experience under the lights and that experience ain't good experience, then you have Earl Little Jr. that you can try.
Right.
So I think the good thing is you have two that you're set on, and the last one you have 2 or 3 guys that you feel like can be, very good options for you.
Right. Yeah. And again, now please don't be like, take this to the bank. Michael said that, Duke Cooper starting. No, I'm just saying that based on what I've been hearing and reading, it sounds like he might get the nod for the opening day. Now, Earl Little could show up these next couple of days before they go and dominate. And they're like, okay, we're just going to roll with him. I don't know. It just sounds like his name has come up a lot when they've talked about that slot corner position. And he was, as you said, in fact, a composite 4-star recruit, 41st highest prospect in Florida, 22nd cornerback nationally in the 247 composite, was number 9 in America's position and number 20 overall in Florida by ESPN.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a guy who's talented, and that's why, like, I was a little sad to see him go when he left because I knew the talent that he had, and now I was kind of wondered when he came back, like what they were going to do with him. And now that you have like 15 guys at safety battling for one spot, I kind of figured like Kevin Knowles probably wasn't moving back. So then you just leave him there. So I think that makes sense. And I could see him honestly being your game 1 starter just from an experience standpoint.
Yeah.
And then you kind of, because again, like we talked about, you got 2 good offenses that you're going to face early on. So you don't really want to be mixing and matching early on. You want to kind of lock some things down.
Well, and if you're running that, and if Georgia Tech is running, 4 wide, then you're definitely going to see Earl Little because he's going to have that other. You would assume he'd have the other slot corner position as well, too.
Yeah. So you could see a situation where you get them both on the field. But now looking back to safety behind these guys, I'm really excited for the year Shaheem Brown is going to have. I've been high on Shaheem for a long time. I think it was just a matter of getting the experience. He now has 1,222 snaps of experience. Oof. The last 2 years, he's had 70 plus PFF grades, which, 60 is about average. 70 plus is like that Power 5 starter level status. And I will say, for what it's worth, it's too much calculating to do nowadays with all the transfers. But a page called, I think it was Dog Stats or whatever, they put out in 2022. Georgia had the most 70-plus PFF players returning. They won a national championship. In 2023, Florida State had the most 70-plus players, and daggone it, we should have won a national championship. Right. So, that 70-plus PFF grade, they're not the gospel, but it does mean a little something. And he's had 70-plus in the past 2 seasons. Only a 10% missed tackle rate last year, which he cut in half from 2022. He definitely has gotten better pretty much every year. 50% reception rate in 2023. A little bit higher than 22, but he had more targets. He also had an interception and a PBU last year. And the other thing is he's good at the kind of bringing pressure from the safety position. 10 pressures, 6 hurries, and 2 sacks. So I think he is going to step into that quarterback position. This may even be a candidate to wear that play calling headset for the defense. I think he's going to step into Akeem Dent's role, and I think you're going to see him be the quarterback of that defense. So I think Shaheem, we've heard he's had a really good camp.
Yep.
He's coaching the young guys. He looks like he's ready to go. I have, again, that's a give the lock, throw away the key. I think you take that one to the bank. I think Shaheem's good to go. It's the other safety position that you're kind of waiting to see shake out. And I don't know about you, Michael, but we're getting ready to go into Georgia Tech prep. Haven't really heard one way or the other who it's going to be. I mean, my pick would be Conrad Hussey, 213 snaps of experience, 8.7% missed tackle rate last year, 50% reception rate, 2 BBUs, one of the craziest interceptions, athletic interceptions you'll see. I mean, this kid, I think he's like AZ Thomas. He's that really high ceiling guy. Doesn't have the most experience, but he did play a good bit last year. Then you look at Kevin Knowles, 1,491 snaps, 403 in 2023 alone. All these are at FSU. But this was the one knock we had on Kevin Knowles, 28.9% missed tackle rate, which was basically the highest of any starting player. 87.5% reception rate, only 1 PBU and no interceptions on twice as many snaps as Hussey. So to me, I don't know, man. And then you also got Devontae Brown in there. You got Ashton Barker in there that you can throw in the mix. I think it's probably going to come down to Kevin Knowles, Devontae Brown, and Conrad Hussey. I think you got like 2 experienced guys that you've seen play on film for multiple years, and then you got that talented guy. So which one of those went out, I really don't know. Of course, you trust Patrick Surtain to pick the winner.
That's right.
But I like all 3 options. I will say that. I'm probably the lowest on Kevin Knowles because of his tackling. We talked about that before, man. It's never been that like he's not in the position to make a play.
He's always in position.
He just is like, it's like time to tackle somebody. And there he goes. And it's like he just ducks his head and misses them. And, you've heard good things coming out of fall camp about, and again, that was his first year at safety. So it's a different type of deal, when you're trying to tackle somebody from that position. But yeah, man, I think you got 3 good options. I'll say that. I'm just ready to see who it's going to be. And if it were me, I like Hussey, but again, I'm not Patrick Surtain. So,
well, I've again, projection guys. I've been reading and hearing that it's potentially going to be probably Hussey. He would be who I'd put my money on to start that, at least to start the season. I mean, and remember last year he was FSU's defensive freshman of the year. He won the freshman of the year award. I mean, he had a great game against Pitt. Obviously, that interception you're talking about, was like crazy. He had two turnovers that he got against Pitt. He actually started the Orange Bowl game. God rest his soul. Orange Bowl game. But he started the Orange Bowl game. He had a career high 7 tackles against Georgia there. So he's shown the ability to step into that role. I think early on, if it is him, I think they're going to have maybe a rotating piece right there, kind of like they did a little bit. Was it last year or the year before where they kind of were rotating that other safety position? I think you're going to see Kevin Knowles. I think they're going to give it a shot again to see if he's gotten better with his tackling. I mean, that's his problem. Like you said, he was always, it was never that he was out of position. It was that he was in position, but he couldn't tackle a wet noodle if it stood right there in front of him. Like, I mean, it was bad. And so I think you'll see that. I think you'll see a little bit of rotating, but I would put I'd put a quarter, because that's all I got, on Conrad Hussey probably starting the season off.
Yeah, I would think so. And if I'm not mistaken, gosh, I can't remember even now, but I think somebody might have picked them to have a breakout season. Maybe we'll see. So, and I think somebody else picked somebody else to have a breakout season.
I did. Okay, so that's why I'm not giving up on them.
Right. So we're going to see where it goes. But I do like the depth that you have at safety. If nothing else. Last year, whenever Akeem Dent was dealing with injury, you kind of had one guy. I mean, you turned to a little bit of Hussey, but mostly Kevin Knowles.
Right.
At least this year, if things don't go great, you have a couple of guys to turn to. So. Yeah, man, I think when you go through the position groups, I think that's what gets you excited about here. You realize that yes, they lost a lot, but like you talked about, yes, they brought in a lot of talented guys, and I think they have the potential. It's like I talked about with 2021. Potential equal, or 2022 season, potential equals production. If these guys can live up to their potential, this can be one of the best defenses in the country. They're just going to have a harder slate of offenses to do it against. So I think if they do finish as one of the best defenses in the country, it's going to be even more impressive.
That's right.
Than maybe it was last year. So, and just to round this episode out with a quick minute here on special teams, Ryan Fitzgerald, shout out to you, my friend. 90.5% on his field goals last year, 19 to 21, 18 or 8th in the country, 59 to 59 on PATs. Mastromano, an absolute weapon, 45.42 average, 14th in the country. We had 2 block kicks last year, which I think we're going to see more this year. We've heard Pat Payton just ain't letting no kicks get off in fall camp. So, that length and that burst that he has, I think you're going to see some block kicks this year. Kick returns, we were actually 7th in the country, 25.44 yard average, 2 touchdowns. And I think you're going to see that get better this year too with Deuce Spann and Jalen Lucas. Jalen Lucas was one of the best kick returners in the Big Ten. Deuce Spann has been one of the best in the ACC. So you got some weapons back there. And like we talked about, if things get close, you might need that special teams. And right. So I think that could be a big part of it. So, man, it's going to be a weapon this year. But overall, man, just some final thoughts on the defense. I feel good about this group. I think they're going to be a really good defense. I think they're going to be the anchor of this team. I think special teams is also going to be a very underrated weapon for this team. When you talk about flipping field position and getting points in the red zone, even if it's a field goal, not like you said the other day with, what was it, 7 in the hand is better than 3 in the bush or something. That's right. Like that. So, but I do think they're going to have to strap up and play this year because you got a tougher slate of offenses. But I definitely am excited about what this defense brings this season.
Yeah, I am too. I'm excited about what they can bring. I'm excited about the talent that's come there. And yes, they've lost production, but I would imagine that the potential of the talent that they have on that field will help ease some of the concern in production. They're going to give up some more yards. We should go ahead and anticipate that. We should go ahead and anticipate that they're going to give up maybe a little bit more, some more points than they did last season. But I think overall, I think you'll still see I'm not going to say dominant just yet, but I think you'll see a potentially really good defense each and every weekend, as long as the coaching and development's there. And one thing I didn't say about the linebacker thing, that when we talked about their position, the one thing I will give credit to Randy Shannon on is that while the recruiting of the linebackers hasn't been up to par, the development and the play of the linebackers have been, as we said, productive. And honestly, in a 4-2-5, that's what you need. You would love to have an elite linebacker play, but productive linebacker play is just is good. And so I will give Randy Shannon credit for that. Also for special teams, man, Fitz magic, and I'm knocking on wood here because I don't want to jinx anything. Okay, Fitz, let's do it again this year. Let's be good. And of course, Alex Mastromano. I mean, gosh, what a weapon! The Aussie punting game and just the whole thing just keeps us in the game. I mean, the punt is basically a critical part of the defense there too. So, and then of course, kick return, obviously with Jalen Lucas, I think, let's go. I mean, let's put that man back there and see what he can do.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say, too, that I definitely echo what you said about Randy. The play on the field has been really good. And then also, I think it is worth mentioning again. Remember, Ernie Sims this year can help coach. So that is going to be big, man. But yeah, overall, I definitely think that I'm excited about it. I just wanted to touch on Mastromano real quick. I was just pulling up some of his numbers, some more in-depth stuff. So yeah, I mean, you're looking at he downed inside the 20 last year, 30 punts inside the 20. That was more than double, or that was about double what he did in 2022 with 15. Now, he didn't punt a whole lot in 2022.
Because we were scoring.
That offense was so good, 34 points to 67. So, man, I think special teams will be an underrated weapon this year. I think you'll probably see a couple kick return touchdowns, a couple of crucial block kicks.
Hopefully.
And so hopefully, man, I think the defense will lead the way to a successful season. But, guys, the next one is the big one coming up that we're going to be recording for you guys. That is the season win-loss prediction. That's where all of this comes together for a fun one. And you never know what we're going to say. You never know what we're going to pick. It could be 12-0. I've seen some 8-4s out there. I was listening to some other podcasts the other day. I've seen some 8-4s and 9-3s out there. So we'll see where we stand on it. Go check out our sponsor for today, Alumni Hall FSU. Get loaded up on that new FSU gear, 10% off using code SPEAR. Drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, as well as a rate and review on the podcast. We've had some of you in the comments tell us that I tell my friends, I tell all the Seminole friends. So we sure appreciate that. Tag a friend, use the buddy system. Hey, I like this podcast. I think you should listen to it too. So we appreciate you guys for all your support and helping spread the word. So shout out to you guys, and make sure you check out that offensive preview, the deep dive we did on DJU, as well as get ready for that win-loss prediction. So Michael, we're getting close to the season, man. This is where it counts. So until the next one, we appreciate you guys tuning in.